parts. Most of you only got through part one. So I'm going to give you, originally I'd planned for only 30 minutes for the second part, but just anticipating based on how last time went that you might need a little longer. I'm going to give you 45 minutes to do it today. And then whenever you're finished, you can only do a tiny bit of this homework because we're not going to do all the notes, but I'm just going to kind of get you started so that when you do finish it, we're not like a whole day behind. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of notes, and then you're going to take part 2 of your test, whatever time you have left, you can finish your homework. Okay, so what we're learning today is not any word problems. Okay, a lot shorter and easier than related rates or implicit, which is what y'all are taking your test over today. So if you'll take a look at the top, let's fill in some blanks here. Okay, a derivative is a slope. We know this, yes? Okay, so if you take the derivative, the derivative can tell you stuff about the slope of that equation. So first thing you're going to do for what's called the first derivative test is you're going to take the derivative. So for number 1, will you just take the derivative of that? Okay, remember you're going to take the number up top times it down. So if it's a 2x3, what would the derivative of that be?
6x squared.
Okay, so f prime of x equals 6x squared. Okay, we're moving on to the next term. 2 times 3 is 6, and now my x is just going to be a regular first power x. Okay, then minus 36x, what's the derivative there? And then the plus 4 goes to 0. Okay, after you take the derivative, that's step 1. You are going to find what are called critical numbers. Critical numbers are anywhere that your derivative equals 0 or undefined. Now, you'll notice that your derivative can really only be undefined if your f prime has a fraction with x's on the bottom. So in this case, is it even a fraction to begin with? No. Then this second scenario, I can kind of skip. You can only let it be undefined if you have a fraction with an x on the bottom, which we don't. So take your f prime you just took, set it equal to 0. That's step 2. So I'm going to take my original equation, 6x squared plus 6x minus 36, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. Now, that's quadratic. That means we're going to have to factor. Is there anything I could factor out to make my factoring a little bit easier? 6, very good. So I'm going to take my 6 out. Now this is a 1x squared plus a 1x, and then 36 divided by 6 is 6. Okay, from here, however you factor is fine, but A, B, C. Okay, y'all know I do the little x thing to factor. Remember, it's a AC at the top, basement at the bottom. So if I do 1, remember this 6 is not a part of it, so I'm just going to put my finger over it. So if I do 1 times negative 6, I get negative 6. And then I list all my factors. 6 only has 2 partners, 1 times 6 or what? 3 and 2, very good, or 2 and 3, doesn't matter the order. Now my B number in the middle is a positive 1. So if I want to pick numbers that minus to 1, who am I picking? Okay, 2 and 3, but then I have to pick which one's going to take the minus. So if I want the 1 to stay positive, I'm going to put the minus on the 2. Okay, from there, your parentheses would be x minus 2 and x plus 3. Okay, now don't forget that 6 is still in the front. Okay, but remember that our answers are only going to come from x's. So if I have an x minus 2, what's the answer to that going to be? X equals what? Positive 2. And then if I have an x plus 3, what's my other number going to be? Negative 3. Okay, those numbers that you just found are called critical numbers. Okay, or pretty much for the rest of the notes, I'm just going to call those CNs for critical numbers. Okay, what you are going to do next, let's go back up to your steps. So we took the derivative, we found the critical numbers. What does step 3 say? There's an I. Interval test. So I want you to draw a number line. And I want you to put the numbers that you just found on that line, but they have to go in order. So which number should I put on the number line first? Okay, -3 we'll say is here. And then +2 we'll say is here. If you want to write out all the numbers in between, that's fine, but I'm not going to. Okay, those numbers are places where the derivative is 0. Okay, that's how we found them. The next step is going to be, let's fill in our little blank here. We're going to test the sign of f prime on each of the subintervals to find out whether f is increasing or decreasing. Now, if you don't know what those words mean, increasing just means your graph is uphill. Decreasing means your graph is downhill. So literally just think, is it going up or is it going down? F will be increasing for any f prime is positive intervals. And it will be decreasing whenever your f prime is negative. Okay. So now that you have that filled in, let's finish out the question. Everybody good with that top part? Okay. So on your number line, I want you to pick a number that would be on this section of the number line. So any number that would be bigger than 2. 7 is great. You're going to take that number. You're just picking one guy from this section of the number line, and you're going to plug it into your f prime equation to see if it comes out positive or negative. Now, the good news about this is that you get to be really lazy. We're only going to plug in to this part. And we don't care about the number. We just care about if it's going to come out positive or negative. So remember, the one we're plugging in is 7, yeah? What is 7 plus 3? Positive or negative? Okay, put a little plus here. What is 7 minus 2? Positive. What is 6? Positive. So I have a positive times a positive times a positive. Overall, what is the sign of f prime on that interval? Big positive. Okay, now let's go between -3 and 2. Pick any number. Don't pick like a weird fraction. Okay, but like a normal number from -3 to 2. 1 is great. 1's easy. What is 1 plus 3? Positive or negative? Those are the only choices. 1 plus 3 is positive. What about 1 minus 2? Negative. And what about 6? Still positive. If I multiply a positive times a negative times a positive, overall, what's the sign on this middle chunk? Negative. Okay, we have one more subinterval left. Now I need from -3 to the left. So I need a number that's left of -3 on the number line. What could we pick? -6 is great. Okay, tons of options though. We're just gonna pick one. So -6 plus 3. How does it come out? Negative. What about -6 minus 2 more? Negative. Very good. Okay, and then the last number is just a 6. What 6 is sign? Positive. And if I multiply a positive times a negative, overall, how's it gonna come out? Big positive. Now, we were checking the signs for f prime, but remember that f prime is going to tell us stuff about f. Whenever my f prime is positive, that means the slope was positive, so f would have been going up. Then at -3, my f prime changes to be negative values. And when f prime is negative, the slope of f is negative, which means which way would f be going? Uphill or downhill? Downhill. Okay, then at 2, it changes again. That my f prime switched back to a positive. And when f prime is positive, what is f doing? F is going uphill. Very good. Okay, so for your homework, which you don't have to finish by next class, but there are some questions that ask you to find when f is increasing. So let's put right here to the side. F is increasing, and you're just going to list the intervals where your graph is going to be going uphill. So for example, now remember this number line goes on and on and on forever. So how far to the left does it go? Negative infinity until -3. Union, because I have another uphill section. And then when does it start being uphill again? 2 till when? Let's say this part of the number line would be infinity. Okay, because your f is increasing when your f prime came out positive. Now, if the question on your delta math said decreasing, what interval would you list? From -3 till 2. Okay, one other thing the first derivative test is used for. That's what the process you just did is called. You can find when the function's increasing or decreasing. You can also find mins and maxes. So a minimum is going to happen when your graph goes downhill to uphill. A max is going to happen when it goes from up to down. So looking at -3, what's your guess? Is that a min or a max? It goes from up to down. That makes it a max. And then where does your min happen? Where does the minimum value happen at? There you go. Okay, so you can just label that on your number line. Okay, I'm going to write it over here to the side. F has a max at x equals -3. F has a min at x equals 2. But just think about a maximum's like the top of a mountain. Okay, a min would be like the valley between mountains. Okay. Now, just to kind of tie it all together with a nice pretty bow, we're going to draw a sample picture. Okay, so give me a little grid up here. And I want you to count out 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3. Okay, the first derivative test only tells you if it's going uphill or downhill. It doesn't tell you how high it gets or how low it goes. So all that I know is my graph until -3 is going which way? Up or down? So it's going to go up. And then what happens at -3? It switches to go down. Now, I don't know how low, but I'll just guess it goes down to here. Okay, but we don't know how low. That's not what the derivative test tells us. It just tells us which way. Okay, and then at 2, what happens? It switches back to going up. Okay, so this would be your max. This would be your min. Okay, but remember, you don't know exactly how high or low it goes. You just know that there's a curve in that spot. Okay? Turn the page, please. Oh, wait, and actually, let's fill in these last 2 little things here. So it says we have a local or relative max when f prime changes plus to minus. And then you're going to have a minimum when f prime changes minus. Okay, but to me, instead of memorizing these, just think about, is it a hill or a valley, right? And that'll keep it pretty easy. All right, go ahead and turn the page. We're going to do just 2 more, just to kind of get the idea. So take a look at number 2. First thing I want you to do is take the derivative. That's the first step of a derivative test. So you have your f right there. Take the derivative. F prime of x equals. And what would that derivative be? Okay, 12x cubed, then what? Minus 12x squared. Very good. After I take the derivative, flip back to your front page if you don't remember. What do I do with the derivative? Set it equal to what? 0, and then you need to factor. So if I'm looking at my equation, how could I factor that? Okay, 12x, and I would be GCFing that out, yeah? So these can both divide by 12x. Could I take out more than 1x? X squared. What's that gonna leave me with in my parentheses? An extra x here. And then would this still be a 12 if I divided the 12 out? Now it's gonna be a 1. Okay, from here, I want to identify what are called my critical numbers. Okay, remember that your critical numbers are the x's that you get from this step. So if I have an x minus 1, what's the answer for that? Minus 1 is going to go to positive 1. And then does anybody remember if you have an x on the outside, what's the number answer for that? 0. Very good. Okay, and then I'm going to write underneath that x is on the outside and then underline O. So remember, an x on the outside means 0 is going to be your number answer. Okay, from there, draw me a little number line. This is called an interval test. And you're going to take those numbers that you found and put them on the number line in order. So 0 needs to come first, 1 comes second. Remember though, you're plugging in a sample point to this version of the derivative, the factored version. So tell me a number bigger than 1 on this part. 2 is good. What is 2 minus 1? Remember, your only answers are positive or negative. We don't care about the number, just the sign. 2 minus 1. Positive. Put a little plus here. Okay, what about 2 squared? Positive. What about 12? Positive. So if I times a positive by a positive times a positive, what's the overall sign? Big positive. Very good. Between 0 and 1, what fraction could I pick for that interval? Half is good. Okay, normally we try not to pick up if only fractions are between 0 and 1. So what's a half? Take away 1. Positive or negative? Negative. What about a half squared? Positive. And then what about 12? Positive. What happens when I multiply a plus times a minus? Big minus. Good. Okay, last interval, we need a number to the left of 0 on the number line. What can we pick? Negative 2 is good. What is negative 2 minus 1 more? Put a negative in that interval. What about negative 2 when I square it? Positive, very good. So I have a negative positive, and then I also have my 12, which my 12 has been a positive this whole time. And I'm going to multiply those 3 things together. So a positive times a negative. What's the overall sign? Big negative, very good. Now remember, those are the signs of f prime, but they tell me what f is doing. So when f prime comes out negative, what does that tell me original f was doing? Uphill or downhill? Downhill is correct. Okay, then between 0 and 1, what was the sign of f prime? It came out negative, which means f would have been going which way? Downhill. And then at 1, my f prime switches to what sign? Positive values, which means original f would have been going which way? Uphill. So if your question asks you, when is f, let's say, decreasing this time, what interval would you be listing? Negative infinity to 1. Very good. F is decreasing on negative infinity to 1. Okay. Now, for your homework, if you wanted to do negative infinity to 0 and then again 0 to 1, I think it would count it right. But just don't break it up if you don't have to. You know what I mean? Okay. Now let's say that the question asks you for a min or a max. Is 0 a minimum, a maximum, or neither? Neither one, because it goes from downhill to just going down more. That doesn't count, so I want you to put a neither there. Okay, that's not a min or a max. Then what happens at 1? Min or max? Minimum. So I'm going to put f has a relative minimum at x equals 1. Okay. If you get to the part in the homework where it's asking for absolute minimums, you've gone too far. We're not covering that today. Let's draw a little picture and then we're going to do one more example. So give yourself a little grid here. We're going to put x equals 0 would be here. And we'll put x equals 1 over here. At the beginning of the graph, which way is f going? Is it increasing or decreasing? Decreasing, or it's going downhill, right? Okay, then at 0, here's what happens. Your graph flattens out, but then it keeps going down. So it doesn't ever actually like aim back up. It flattens out, but then it keeps going the same way. Okay, that's why this is a neither. Because it doesn't actually make a value, right? Okay, then at 1, what happens? My graph switches to be increasing or uphill. That's where your minimum happens. So this would be a neither. And then this one would be a minimum. Okay. And if you were to graph this original equation in Desmos, it should match the stuff that you're getting here. Okay. All right, one more last, then I'm going to give you a little time to study before we start part 2 of your test. Okay, skip number 3. The reason I want to skip number 3 is what rule would that one require to take the derivative? Not chain rule, product rule. Very good. And I want to get into that because I don't want. So turn the page. All right, step number 1 is to take the what? The derivative. Why do I not have to do that on number 4? They already gave me f prime if you look right there. So I'm going to put take derivative, check. Okay, I don't actually have to take the derivative because they gave me f prime right off the bat. So I know that f prime of x equals, I'm just going to rewrite it, x squared minus 4 times g of x. Okay, what do I do with the derivative after I take it? I set it equal to what? 0. So I have 0 equals x squared minus 4 times g of x. Okay, next I want to factor. How can I factor x squared minus 4? Very good, perfect squares. So it'd be x plus 2 and x minus 2. Okay, g of x, we're just kind of keeping it there for now. Okay, let's set these pieces equal to 0. If I have an x plus 2, what's the answer going to be? X equals negative 2. And then if I have an x minus 2, what's it going to give me? Positive 2. Okay, now, for g of x, does it say that it ever equals 0? No, it says it's always less than 0, but it's never going to give me an equal 0. So these are my only, what are they called? There's the C. Critical numbers, very good. Put them on a number line for me. I'll do it right here. Negative 2 and 2. Okay, give me a sample number for all the numbers to the right of 2 on the number line. What can we pick? 4 is good. Okay, we're plugging into here. What's 4 plus 2? Positive or negative are the only choices. 4 plus 2 is positive. What about 4 minus 2? Positive. But then I get to g of x, and I have to look back at the question. What's the only thing it tells me about g? Okay, read that sign carefully. What's that saying? Less than 0 means g is always what? Always less than 0 means always negative. So if I have a plus times now we know that our g counts as a negative. What's the overall sign going to be? Big negative for that interval. What's a test point between negative 2 and 2? Pick a number between there. 0 is good. What's 0 plus 2? 0 plus 2 is positive or negative. Those are the only choices. Positive. What about 0 minus 2? Negative. And what about G? Negative. So I have a plus, minus, minus. How's it going to come out? Big plus. Okay, less than negative 2. Let's pick negative 10. Okay, negative 10 plus 2. How does it come out? Negative 10 plus 2. Negative. What about negative 10 minus 2? Negative. And what about G? Always negative. So I have minus, minus, minus. Overall, what's the sign? Big minus. Okay, from there, remember that F prime tells me what F is doing. When F prime is negative, is F uphill or downhill? Downhill. Then what happens at negative 2? It switches to uphill. What type of point is this then? Minimum. Okay, and then it switches back to downhill, which makes 2 a what? Maximum. Okay. So if you were asked to find mins and maxes, you would say there's a minimum at negative 2, there's a maximum at positive 2, and then if it asks increasing or decreasing, you would just list on the number line where that happens. So I'm going to put F has relative max at x equals negative 2 and relative minimum at x equals 2. Okay, and then just because your homework does have increasing and decreasing, let's do increasing for this one. F is increasing on what would I list for increasing intervals? What part of the number line? All the way from negative 2 till 2, yeah. Because you're listing like a section of the number line. What if it said decreasing? Then I'd go negative infinity to negative 2, union, and then 2 till infinity. Okay? But you do not need to finish that homework before next class. We'll finish the notes from here. Okay? You can do it. All right. So I'm going to pass back whatever test reviews I have. Okay, and then I'll give you a few questions to look at. And we'll take your test starting at 2. Okay. All right, Barrett. Leo. Lyman.
I didn't even do that. I don't work.
Eva. Yeah. Uh-huh. What?
He's probably not gonna be able to, he's probably not gonna be able to answer me now. I'm not even be able to play really bad. He won't be able to play, but he might be able to play, but. It's like big guys. Have you seen this book? Yeah. It's a purple.
I showed it to school the one time. And she was no, I usually am the one that stays home when I'm sick, but she stayed home instead. And I came.
Go back and finish it.
Yeah, and then just turn it back in.
I'll talk about it. That'll only take about 1 to.
This is here. We press this to.
Oh, that's it. He's on the
Hopefully he doesn't have to get surgery.
Oh, and here's your quiz. You did do implicit.
Did he actually get surgery? Or his surgery got done? Oh, it is surgery. I'll be out for that.
Barrett, here's your quiz back. This is the one some of y'all have been correcting. So I would only have it if you
I need
corrected
to write
it.
that. The quiz. Can we still correct that?
Yeah.
Scared me for a second.
Okay, if I was gonna give you some questions to look at off your review, here's where I want you to circle. You have 15 minutes. Okay, you have one question that's an implicit, which is gonna be just like the implicit section right here, numbers 12 and 13. There's only 2 of them on your review. So circle 12 and 13. I'd take some time to look back over those. On number 12, what rule did we need to use here? Product rule. You should know how to do that. Okay. Then there's a related rate that I want to give. So it's one of these or one of those. And then the other one is a related rate. I'm going to give you 2 examples to look back over. Okay, first one's going to be number 12 down here. Base of a triangle is increasing at a rate of. Okay, but within that question, I want you to focus on part B. Remember how we had to do quotient rule? Okay, you're gonna have to do that on your free response question. So I would specifically look at part B, put a little star there. And then if you want one more to look at besides number 12, number 14 with the railroad track would be another option. Okay, so we're gonna start at 2-ish. I'm gonna say at 2, so that's like 11 minutes. If you need help, ask me. Okay, and otherwise just kind of study, look over it, look at your notes, look at your quiz.